Welcome back to Through the Veil with Elle and Camille. I'm Camille.
I'm Elle.
This is the podcast where we seek to demystify, develop, and celebrate our spiritual gifts through a faith-based lens. And today, if you're watching us on video, you will see a very cute smiling baby. We've got baby Trinity with us. She's all smiles now.
She's real tired. Naps aren't happening, so she might not stick. But for now.
This might be how we get some of our Spotify and Apple listeners to switch over to YouTube just so they can not miss out on the smiling baby because she's pretty cute. Well, so today we're going to interview each other. We're going to talk about what have we learned doing these sessions? How has this podcast and doing this for the past year impacted our lives? So we're going to kind of do a back and forth where Elle and I interview each other. And we have some set questions. And of course, like typical, we're going to just kind of see what comes up and what interesting tangents we find ourselves in.
One of the really fun things about this podcast is I think we can kind of take a more casual setting and really explore things a bit deeper than if we were being really tight and tense with the conversation. So I love this idea because I think in the introspection, we often gain a lot of understanding and knowledge, and you can look at the course of something in hindsight and see all of the pieces and how they came into play, right? So Camille has been working professionally for about a year, right?
Yeah,
Just
it's
over
exactly a
now.
year. I think it's January 20th was my year date.
That's pretty exciting to have that whole year mark. And I have seen you come a really long way, in your confidence within your gifts, in your confidence with working with people. But how do you find you have changed over the course of this year working with your gifts?
I feel like I had a really good foundation. I took a class with Elle a year before that. So I had a lot of practice and like a circle where we would practice and we do development nights and stuff like that. So I feel like I had a pretty good foundation. And then before I took her class, I read a book. I watched like a series on it on TV. I read hundreds of near-death experiences. So I was so interested in this topic. But what I feel as far as like how it's changed me, I think it's really been good because no matter what obstacles I face in my day-to-day life, if I have a session that day, I have to be in the proper frame of mind, right? We talk about raising your vibration in order to access these gifts. I can't stay in a state of like anger, frustration. I have to like call upon, the powers of the divine to help me lift myself out of whatever state of mind I might be in, depending on what I'm going through, to be in a place where I can access what spirits on the other side want to say to their loved ones. Because what I try to do is I think about, okay, how would I feel if I was in the client's position and I wanted to reach out and get a connection to my son Wesley? Like, what would my feelings be sitting there? What am I hoping for? And then I think, what do I need to do, as the connection piece or the translator, so that I can be in a place where I can get those messages? Like, if they need this from me and they really want this to be a special experience, then I need to be in a space where I feel connected to the divine, to the spirit, to help me be this translator, right? So it's really pushed me to be in a better place spiritually, is what I'm saying. Yeah, like if I have a session coming up later that day, it's like whatever I'm going through, I need to put that to the side and I need to get myself in a calm, like still place where I'm connectable.
I have a mentor who always says, like, it's not about you. And the person that is coming to see you, the person that you're helping on either side of the veil, like they don't necessarily care about all your stuff. They
Mm-mm.
just have a communication that they want to get across. There is something important that they are meant to say. There's love that needs to be demonstrated usually, and it's like you gotta work in service with this gift, really. That's really what it's all about, right? You're serving somebody else.
Yeah,
Um,
but what a blessing, because then if it's not all about me, then I get to put my stuff to the side. And honestly, as I, prepare myself for a session, prayer and some meditation, it helps me put my own issues, like there's balance there. It helps me with whatever I'm going through.
Yeah, I had a great example of this yesterday because I was kind of in a bit of a state. I don't know. I'm sleep deprived, super busy, and have a baby. And I do a lot of more of my work in the evenings because my husband is home with the kids. And so it had been kind of a day all day. And then just I had a couple of interviews with people taking my class, and then I had a session. And like by the end of it, I was like, wow, I feel so much better. Like, no matter where my mental state is, every time I work with spirit through that veil, it's kind of a holier place, and you feel uplifted every
Mm.
time afterwards. Like it's connection to God, right? And all of the our angels on the other side, and it's hard to not be impacted positively by that much light.
Yeah, connecting to heaven is such an uplift. It's such a beautiful thing. Also, it's really a message I get a lot in sessions from spirits on the other side is I have an enhanced perspective now. And the analogy that I always think of is a snow globe. So if you're holding a snow globe, that let's say there's a little village and there's little people and their little houses. If you're holding it in your hands, and let's say like villager in the snow globe is going to go to the grocery store, and you know, as one holding the snow globe, that they're best friends in the grocery store. So they're going to run into each other. You kind of have that heads up. Things happen a couple steps ahead, right? So, or like maybe the grocery store's out of carrots and you can see into the grocery store and you're like, I know they're going to go get carrots, but they can't. And I know that they're not going to get carrots before they know they're not going to get carrots.
Mhm.
So those are kind of silly examples, but I hear this message a lot from the other side. Like I have an enhanced perspective. I can see a couple steps ahead. So it's this message of reassurance from these loved ones like, don't worry, I've got your back. I know what you're going through. I'm in the daily details with you. Um, and I'm here to help you. So just know that you have this, you know, this support um, coming from the other side that it's not all up to you. Like we're here to help you too. We're part of your support system. So that's what a really beautiful message that I can internalize. Like, well, who's there to help me? Because the way I think of it, um, is like when you think of spirit team or people on the other side who are looking after you, guardian angels, loved ones, etc. I think of a wheel, and then the hubcap of the wheel is like the main people that are really on your like focused on you at that time, like the
Right.
ones that are the guardian angels. Like I feel like I have a few that take shifts. And they probably get off shift. They're like, "Whew, she's a lot." But yeah, so I feel like there's a few in the hub, and then you've got the peripheral wheel. And like my son Wesley, for example, when I was debating if I was going to get into using this gift, like alongside the grief coaching I already did, and like make it more of a professional thing, I was really hesitant because not that I don't want to help people, but it just kind of felt like pushing me out of my comfort zone to include this with what I offer. And I was also kind of like, it's such a misunderstood gift in the Christian world. I don't want to upset anybody or like have people misunderstand me, especially when my son's wrapped up in it. I don't want something like precious, like my relationship with my son, to be like misunderstood, like I'm trying
Yeah.
to
On public display.
like, thank you. Yeah. And so it was like a really hard thing. But I remember having three separate sessions with different people. One with you, I was just helping you out for a practice circle, right? So I was like the volunteer sitter for that session. And then another practice circle, I was another volunteer for. And then I paid for a professional session with Annie, who we had on the podcast a few episodes ago. And all three of you gave me the same message. You're supposed to do this professionally. I see you teaching classes. I see you working with clients. I see you writing another book. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is kind of overwhelming. But it pushed me to, okay, I'm ready now. Because I got those
Yeah.
three sessions or readings within a month of each other. And it was like, boom, boom, boom. And all three of them said, Wesley is going to be a part of like, he's really supporting you right now. He's going to help you. He's going to help you connect to spirits on the other side. He's going to help you feel confident using your gift. And I felt him at the hub of my wheel during that period of time. Wesley was having interactions with me multiple times a day, supporting me, cheering me on, letting me know he was around. It was such a beautiful experience that sometimes I want to pretend like I'm not secure in my gifts. So he'll come back and be around me so much because he was at the hub and now he's more peripheral. And I'm like, oh, I really should have. And I did prize it, but I'm like, that was a really special time, like very special
Yeah.
for us.
Yeah, I like that concept of a hubcap. I think it's a really great analogy for it. I always kind of identify them as kind of like guideposts or mile markers oftentimes when I work with spirits, they'll identify to me that they help us in like one aspect or area of our lives. Like you may have somebody who steps in and is like helping you in your career path, or maybe as being a parent, a mother, a father, maybe somebody who's helping you work through some of your childhood trauma. Maybe it's a trauma they share with you, right? And so it's like people on that team of supporting angels, spirit team, they oftentimes have specific tasks or things that they're doing to help you with. And so sometimes they can come in and out of your life as those tasks become accomplished, or as you're succeeding, or maybe struggling a little bit more in those particular areas that their emphasis is on. Camille, now that you've been doing this kind of professionally for a year and working with a lot of other people, how has handling or interacting with the spirit world impacted your testimony and your relationship with God?
It's definitely been it's been a trust walk for me because this is not a typical request. I don't think God asking me to use a gift to help people connect to loved ones on the other side. Some people would
Like
say,
off the wall. It's
yeah,
a
some
little
people would
strange.
say it's impossible or like ludicrous or whatever they would say. And so for me to it's a trust walk. You know what it reminds me of? When I was a kid, we did this family camp that was like, it was like Christian based. And there was this one exercise where there was these different sounds and you're supposed to like close your eyes and hold this string, and like go to a destination. Um, and there was these really loud distracting noises and you were supposed to follow this like little tinkling bell. But instead there was these loud like pots and pans. And I remember I made it safely to the destination, keeping my eyes closed. Um, and I remember my dad was so kind of surprised that I did because a lot of people didn't make it to the end. And he was like, wow, that was really cool that Camille really was able to like listen to that fine tuned sound and make it to the end. And it reminds me of that because it's not a popular or common path that I'm on, but I feel like I have this really like that still small voice that guiding me. And God is asking me to trust him. And I have put my trust in him. And that's been a beautiful thing. So I would say that it's created a closer relationship with me and God. I kind of feel like I'm on a tightrope in a way because I feel like these gifts are misunderstood so much in not just my faith tradition, but Christianity as a whole, that
Right.
it requires me to hold on to that, hold on to that relationship with God and just keep listening, always be listening. And then also, just as far as my testimony, the amount of interaction I've sensed in my own life from the other side as I do sessions with other people to connect them with their loved ones on the other side. I just feel like I have this community of support that I wasn't as tapped into before. I've had interactions with great grandparents that I didn't ever get to know in this life, where I'm like, one time, for example, I'm sitting in the tub and I like felt a male spirit just come. And I can always pick up on gender first. I'm like, there's a male spirit visiting me. And so I said, hey, like, I sense that you're here. What do you want me to know? And I felt like he wanted me to figure out who he was. And I was like, oh, okay.
Guessing
He
game.
said,
Guess who?
yeah. So I have this app on my
Wear a
phone
red
called,
hat.
I loved cheese. No. So he said that I have an app on my phone called Family Search. And so I pulled it up. He said, look in your Family Search app. So, okay. So I go into the app and I felt like he was on my mom's side of the family. I went up a few generations and he's like, bingo, that's me. And I was like, oh, you're my great grandpa. And I like was feeling into what does his personality feel like? Um, and then I felt a woman come and that was like, this is your wife. And I'd never met her either. And so I felt her personality. So later I texted my mom. I was like, okay, so felt like I got a visit today from your grandparents. These are the personalities I picked up on. She's like, yep, that's how they were. And I'm like, oh, it was really nice to get to know them. Like, I feel like I have access to those relationships. And that's been beautiful support for me as well. And I felt him come visit me at different times to just send little messages. And it's just nice to be in the know. And I know I'm missing 90% of what they're doing for me on the other side, 99% of what they're doing. But to be
We
even,
only get a glimpse. It's like the crack through the door. We're like, ah, you're
it's,
wrapping presents. I see it. Don't know what they are, but I see it.
so it's just been fun to be a little bit more in the know and just like have a little bit of a foot in the spirit world sometimes has been awesome.
I love that you mentioned that because I mean, my particular journey, I talk about it all the time. Like I have never felt more connected to God. I have never felt so understanding of the way he works or had such direct access to his love for me. Like it blows me away all the time. The amount of love that's there and like the guidance and the care in all the little things. Like it has made me so much more aware of it in a way that I never had before. And I feel like almost like it's like call him up on the phone or send him a text. I'm like, I have a real true understanding of the reality of God. But more than that, I feel like oftentimes people just leave it at that. And the Lord is more than willing to connect us with so much more than that because all of us matter. He loves all of us here, but he also loves all of us there. And it's like, even those people in the family, they were 20 generations back, they're still people. They're real. They had lives. They still have lives, and they care about you. And he cares about that connection and helping us know that we have that connection with our loved ones on the other side. We feel it. Like we will know them,
Yeah.
give it 30 years, right? Hopefully
Yeah.
longer than that. Give it,
Yeah.
let's just go like 50 years. Give it 50 years. And it's like, yeah, we will know them again and they know us now. And it's really, that connection is really important. We're all part of the same family. We still are. And just like your mother loves you and wants to be involved in your life, they are too. And I
Yeah.
think that's beautiful that he like not only allows that, he encourages that. He's like, yes, step in, get to know them because, you know, that relationship is important.
So you've been doing this for 9 years now. What what has surprised you about this gift?
That's a really great question. You know, back when I first kind of came into my own gifts with this, I didn't really know what it was or where it was going. And I feel like a lot of people when they jump into development with this, that's the thing. They're like, feel like I'm being asked to do something with it. I don't know what it is. And I
Hmm.
think that this gift is this thing, but it also like I don't know what it is. And so over the course, it's been really amazing to see how it changed. When I first kind of began trying to intentionally use my spiritual gifts, I had this notion of like what I thought that they were. It's like it's going to look like this, it's going to be like this is how it's going to happen. Wasn't it all that way? And it wasn't really until I got rid of those notions. Like I let go of these things that I thought it was going to be. Like I was like, it's just going to be easy, right? I've had all these experiences. It's going to be clear as a bell. We're just going to hop in. I'm going to have all these, I don't know, visionary experiences and I'm going to hear them talk to me and it's going to be instant connection all the time. Because because God wants me to do it. And it wasn't that way right away. You know, like I had had lots of very clear experiences before that, but over the course of trying to do it on purpose, I realized that there's a lot of work that has to be put into it.
Hmm.
And it's all about practice. Even when you have a talent with something, it's all about practice. So like I'm an artist. I have always been gifted at art. I teach art as well, and like fine arts, painting, drawing, and things like that. Um, and I've been good at art ever since I was a little kid. I was always ahead of the curve. But when I hit high school, I realized if I really wanted to be successful at art, I needed education. I needed practice. I needed to learn about the mechanics of something. And I practiced it a lot. I was drawing all the time. I was painting all the time. Um, and that is when I really started to see gains. I really started to see change in what I was doing. And this talent, this gift is no different than that. When you really want to become good at something, when you want to excel and hit a form of excellence instead of just being good at something, you really have to use it all the time. And so that level of work, I don't think I expected I had to put in at the beginning. I guess other things that surprised me, like I had no idea how I was going to be asked to use this.
Mm.
And I think kind of when you're beginning, it's a bit about you and you're like, I have to figure this out. I have to like use this to help people. I have to be as clear as I can, like as best of a communicator as I can. And the more you do this, the more I think you realize it's not about you at all, like we were
Mm.
saying. That focus shifts off of like how I'm doing my job. Was I successful? Was I accurate? And it shifts into like, no. how was the message received?
I
Did
love
they
that.
feel their loved ones?
Hmm.
Did they feel like they had that conversation? Are they leaving this interaction better than when they got here?
Yeah.
And that shift in perspective is huge.
You
Like
know,
that's when it clicks.
that reminds me of the book Droplets of God by Mavis Patilla, who was a pioneer Christian spirit communicator or medium. And she talked about how the practice of mediumship was shifting from so evidential, where it's like, I'm going to knock your socks off. Your dad loved his green truck that he got in 67. And they're like, oh my gosh, the details, they're astounding. We're going from, we still want to have evidence, but we're moving from that to the essence, where it's like, what did they leave a better person? Like, how did they feel that connection? It's more about the relationship versus I'm going to wow
Yeah.
you with all these details about your mom dyed her hair pink in 1993 and it was a disaster. Like, those are fun. And it's, you always have to have evidence as the foundation. But we're moving into, I'm going to, like, this is a party trick and I'm going to wow your, knock your socks off, to what do you really need to get out of this session? Like, how does this need to help your soul feel comforted and loved and healed? Like, what is the messaging? Because I've been in a session before where I'm getting I got good evidence, I'm giving good messaging. And I've even like leaned in a little bit, like, okay, is there any more evidence that I could possibly give? And the spirit will reprimand me and say, I want to give more messaging right now. I don't want to like give you random information. Like, okay.
Yeah. Take a step back, Camille. It's not about you and your accuracy
Well,
rating.
that's the thing though, is with I do sessions with people all across the board. I mean, as you do too, but I mean, some of them really want like as much evidence as possible, and they're not as
Right.
interested in the messaging. They just kind of want to be wowed. And then most people aren't coming from that perspective. Most people want to have a healing experience and it's about the relationship. But some people just kind of want to have more of that like dopamine hit, like, ooh, wow, you're really good. And so I
Hmm.
have to remember that's not really what I'm here for. I am here to give good evidence, and I do give really detailed things sometimes, but the point is bigger than that.
And I think it used to be like you have to prove that they're there. And to an extent, like
Yeah,
that is why giving that kind of clarifying evidence is really important in particularly what we're doing so that people can really know and believe. And it opens up their heart to that kind of belief of, oh yeah, like they're totally here. That's who you're talking to. That's exactly them. How would you know that? Like that's important. But I think the more important part is that connection and that feeling of the love that they are there and they recognize you and they are in all of the details.
I agree. It's like that balance of sometimes I'll feel like I'm doing a session and everything's coming really easily, but then I want to remind myself, lean in and see if there's any bit more, like go a little deeper. I remember you taught me that in development because that was one of the things I needed to work on. Probably about like 15 months ago. You're like, lean in, and because I would just be like, oh, cool, I'm getting information, like, great. But it's like, what else? Kind of like we've quoted Elder or Richard G. Scott on this podcast a lot, but he would say when you're going to God for revelation and you feel like you're getting something, write it down and then lean in and say, is there anything else you want me to know? What
Yeah.
else? And then you say thank you for what you got. You just want to like see if you can deepen it a little bit.
I think we take a lot of stuff at a surface level. And I don't think God intends us to. Like, he is both in the mystery and in the details. Like, he wants things to be broad, but he's also in all of the nitty-gritty. And so there's always more. There's always more. And he's so willing to give us more if we look harder. Like,
Hmm.
what is that Disney quote? Oh, it's Rafiki. Who's Simba? Like, in the lake. He's like, it's a pond. He's like, look hard. It's like, yeah, it's there. It's below the surface. Just like lean into it.
Look beyond. Yeah. I think that reminds me of symbolism that we see. Like sometimes we see images in sessions that are symbolic. And so it's that work of it's really I think of it as being like a translator because you're getting when I do sessions, I get a lot of thoughts and feelings and some like visuals, sometimes sounds, and it's like piecing it all together, especially if one of the
A
images that
puzzle.
I got is more, yeah, it's a puzzle. If the image is more symbolic, I remember one time in a session I saw a heart being like surrounded by arms. And I told the sitter, the client, I said, I'm seeing this, and what I'm interpreting it as is like she felt a lot of love and support from her friends as she was passing from cancer. And I didn't know the significance of it beyond that. I just, this is what I'm seeing and this is what I'm interpreting it as. And she said, well, we actually created this image for her as her friend supporting her with cancer, that it was a heart surrounded by arms. And I didn't know, like sometimes I tell people I'm getting this image and they're like, oh, cool. And other times they're like, oh my gosh, that's so specific. You just don't know. So you just say what you're
Yeah.
getting. And sometimes it like hits really, really in a special spot. And sometimes it's like, oh, that's good. That's nice to hear.
So we work a lot with, spirits on the other side of the veil doing this. And over the course of this last year, you've had a lot of really condensed experience. What are some really interesting things that you've learned or witnessed about how it works in the next life, in the spirit world?
I know about, we talked about spirit teams already today, and there's specific people that are like, they have a specific task to help you at that time. But I had someone tell me on the other side, I think it was someone's grandma, and she said, my success is your success. Like, my success is so tied. And that really like was such a beautiful concept. She's
Hmm.
so in the details of this person's life to say that if you succeed, I'm doing my job, right? And success was like me helping you navigate this life. You being receptive to in ways I'm trying to nudge, steer and guide you. And of course we're going to stumble along in this life, but if we can just be open enough to like receive and get some help along the way, it's not going to be perfect, but it was just such a beautiful message. My success is your success. And then another one I've really learned about is free will. We have
Hmm.
free will on this side of the veil. God also respects our free will on the other side. I've done a lot of sessions with people that have died from an overdose or by suicide, some self-inflicted way. And a beautiful message that I've gotten that I didn't maybe necessarily get to read about this a lot in near death experiences is how much healing there is provided for you on the other side. Almost like
Yeah.
rehab of the soul is what I call it. And I've had people that say like they died by suicide 3 years ago, and I'm doing a session with their loved one. And they'll tell me, I have done enough healing that now I can help other people who've also passed by suicide more recently, and I'm a mentor to them. And it reminds me of like a 12-step program in a way, because it's like this, that you have a mentor, just like you'd have a sponsor if you were in like a,
Yeah.
an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, or when I was in an eating disorder recovery group, I was a sponsor after I recovered, and it was a beautiful experience. So it's just like it's so organized,
Yeah.
and there's support groups too. I've had people say like, okay, I support women who struggled with drugs, and I'm in like a group where I'm supporting like a mentor of many. Um, just the organization and the amount of healing that's available has been a beautiful thing to witness.
I had a session one time with one guy. It was a man, and he had had a rough childhood. Like, he had kind of some family trauma and situational abuse and things like that that had happened, and it pushed him to kind of more of a rougher path. And he had made some unhappy choices that led down an unhappy road, and
Mhm.
he ended up taking his own life. Um, but in the spirit world, he had found that healing and he stepped into a role being mentor for young people here.
Mhm.
Um, like we're talking about those, spirit kind of teams, those angels that help us with particular tasks. He wasn't necessarily working with people that were in his family line. He was
Mhm.
working with kids who'd had rough backgrounds, kind of like
Similar
like a group home
struggles.
situation, right?
Yeah.
And so like it's like he was like the guy running the youth center down the street. So there were, and this was a really particular and interesting circumstance because he showed me even more specifically that it was kids local to his area. And
Wow,
that was really cool. And I
that
was
is
like,
super
oh my
cool.
gosh, it was specific individuals that were local to his area that he now could identify and know it, with
Mhm.
that advanced perspective from the other side that they're struggling with this and they're struggling with this. And he was lending support. He was that good shoulder angel.
Yes.
It was like giving them, the good ideas and the good inspiration and the strength in hard moments to maybe make better choices than he did. And it was a really beautiful like understanding of like, wow, we have all kinds of help on the other side. And like what kind of amazing forgiveness and opportunity is there, even if we didn't turn out the best here, like we can still give so much back on the other side after we accomplish that healing in a variety of ways. And I think that's one of the things that constantly blows me away is that so much diversity of everything in the spirit world, like diversity of job, like what they're doing is just as expansive and, you know, I don't know, creative maybe as anything that we could do here, right? You could, I don't know. There's all kinds of jobs, everything from like popcorn vendors on the street to CEOs in the world, right? And there's everything like that on the other side as well. Everybody has a task. Most of them are service based. Most of them are giving back and sharing love and support in some way,
Yeah, and some of the jobs I feel like on the other side are hard to describe. Like I'll be like, it feels administrative, but I don't know because I don't know all the things that
right?
go on. But there was one lady who particularly loved books, and I'm like, she does something on the other side with books.
Like record keeping.
Yeah, record. I'm like, I can't tell you exactly, but I'm doing my best to describe what I'm getting. I'm like, I see her surrounded by books. She really likes keeping them organized, and he's like, yeah, my mom loved books.
That's awesome.
But also going back to free will, I forgot to mention. So that rate at which people kind of heal or, get better on the other side is self-paced depending on what suits them. So
Yeah.
I did a session with a woman whose ex-husband hadn't been good to her. And she was like, well, what does he have to say for himself now? And like, what is he up to now? And he was sorry, but he wasn't really willing to have like a real open conversation because he was uncomfortable and he felt hesitant really just going there. And that's how he was here. He could at least say sorry, but he wasn't really ready to go any further than that. I could feel like his progress on the other side was more of like inch by inch versus
Yeah.
some people I feel like they are like fire, on
Yeah.
fire, just
Yeah, I had
depends.
that same experience. I remember I had this one session with um a a man, and he really wanted to hear from his father, but instead his grandmother came through really strong. Really, this woman was like made of iron. And she gave me all this really bizarre imagery of like stones standing still and like almost like I don't know, the Stonehenge or something, like these stones. And I was like, this is a strange, back to symbolism. I was like, this is a really strange image. Do you have anything for this? And he's like, yeah, that's my family, and they're all just stones. And it's like, um, she was this unyielding, unbudging force, and she still was. And it was like she'd been dead for, I don't know, decades or something. She passed when he was younger, and it was still very much like she had not given an inch. She's just this force of nature, stubborn as all get out type woman. And it was like they really work at their own pace. Nobody is pushing and shoving. They can't progress any further until they progress further. And I think for a lot of them, there comes a certain point at which they become aware of this. And so they begin to work a little bit harder. But if they're not, like, you can't, just like in life, you can't force somebody to have an outcome. Even
Yeah,
if you see that they're on a bad path or they're not doing such and such would be so much better for them. Like, go get therapy, man. Deal with your stuff. You'll be happier.
right.
You can't make somebody do that. And even on the other side, they're surrounded by encouragement, and people willing to help them just as much as they're willing to help us. But it really, really all depends on your own choice. And I really fully believe that God gives us the time to do that.
Yeah. Something else I've noticed that's really interesting is like, for example, people that pass maybe like self-inflicted ways from an overdose or suicide. A lot of their education to continue to progress on the other side is attached to helping people on earth because they get to somewhat
Yeah.
live through them because they didn't really fulfill maybe all of the life they were intended to live here. And so they get to learn vicariously. And I've also seen that situation with miscarried children or even children
Hmm.
who pass young that are kind of growing up with their siblings.
With the
Like,
family.
yeah, they're kind of keeping their age. I did a session recently with the boy who passed, and instead of like being like my son, who I felt he was, 20 years old within a few months of passing, and he's like this like mature mentor for me, as well as still kind of feeling like my 4-year-old, little boy. It was kind of confusing, but these kids will grow up as if they were, just
Yeah.
alongside the family, as if they were still on Earth. Like I'm 10 now. Okay, it's been a year now. I'm 11, and they want to grow up like really through their siblings.
With
Like,
them.
yeah, and it's beautiful. And it's just like
Experience
there's
that with
free
them.
will though. So back to development on the other side. I've also heard spirits tell me the more I develop on this other side, the more of a heightened perspective I have, and the more I can help, more empowered I am to help my
Yeah.
loved ones.
Yeah, I have had that experience so often. I know I talk about the staircase all the time, but it's like
Yes.
when you get to a certain point, you be able to have like more responsibility and more power, more authority maybe to do
Mhm.
certain tasks and certain things. And that the higher you get, like each step, it seems like you're like, I don't know, it's like having a teenager, right? Okay, now today you can go do this on your own. I'll let you go 3 miles from home or four, or you get like an extra 30 minutes of tablet time. I don't know. Like the organizational arrangement, it extends with all of their development that they have on the other side. They gain more and more responsibility and power to interact in different ways. When you gain more knowledge or more education or more experience in something, you're more capable, right? And it's not necessarily chronologically equivalent. Like it's not somebody they've reached their 10-year mark, so like they've graduated to the upper class. It really has to do with personal effort. It has to do with what they've put into to working on themselves, gaining that light, gaining that, truth or understanding or love on the other side.
I did get an understanding that experts in a certain field will give like lectures, and people can go attend like an Einstein lecture. Like
That'd be
they
awesome.
share. Wouldn't that be amazing?
Like like Capitol Hill. Oh, Einstein's giving a lecture today. I'm attending that one. What's your 3 o'clock look like?
Seriously. Yeah. Okay, I wanted to ask you what you've seen in sessions, as far as people who maybe weren't spiritual or religious on this side who turned to God. Like, what have you learned? What have you seen there? Have there been any surprises where like you're giving a session to somebody who's like, yeah, they were kind of interested in that, but not really. Like, what have you seen?
First, I need to state that with like I come with my own bias to the table here, right? I have a very strong faith in my particular faith tradition. But I try really hard. Not everybody I meet with and have sessions with is religious. A lot of them aren't. A lot of them aren't my particular faith background. And so you kind of have to step back and respect wherever they are and whatever they're saying and whatever they're coming from. And also, as a reminder, the spirit world is huge and vast. If you think about all the people that have ever passed away and are on the other side, like just to hold that amount of matter, it's like eternal, right? It's huge. And so there are just as many places and locations and things going on in that world as there would be here. So you have to keep in mind that perspective. But I have met with people who were Buddhist or people who were Muslim or people who were Christian. And oftentimes their loved ones on the other side will reflect those beliefs back. And so in those particular situations, it is interesting to see that no matter what faith background they come from, the more they lean into the one common denominator is God. There's
Mhm.
always a divine presence. And that's no matter where you're coming from, there's always a divine presence. And the closer that you are trying to move to that divine presence, the more light they seem to take in on the other side. And I, the difference I can feel, like I can see when I'm interacting with a spirit, whether they're coming to me visually or maybe more through feelings or even auditorily, though that one's a bit weirder. Like, how do you hear the level of light in someone?
But it's a very
But like,
multi-sensory world over there, and so it's hard
it
for us to be
is.
translators for something we haven't. I haven't had a near-death experience. Elle hasn't. I mean, I would love to if I didn't have to like get physically hurt too badly, but
I mean, if you can be assured you're coming back, still work to
yeah,
do. Yeah, but they speak to us in a lot of different ways, and oftentimes you can't just isolate one sense that they're talking to us through, though sometimes some really emphasize one.
yeah.
But yeah, the closer that they get to that elevation, like the further the evolution, the progression of their soul has gotten, there is this distilled quality of light to them. And it is something that I can see and like it's palpable. Like I can feel it.
Mm,
And so no matter what faith background they come from, the closer they get to that deity, the more effort and work they're putting into, the more that is apparent. But I mean, within my own faith tradition, I have had many reaffirming experiences of people coming to Christ and having massive changes, people who are really, really stuck in their life, who maybe were like totally opposed to those kinds of things, like anything religious, anything to do with God or Christianity or Jesus, who on the other side have a complete turnaround, a 360, a change of heart. And oftentimes it's really funny. Um, that's one of those things that their loved ones will end up like at the beginning, they'll be like, are you sure? Because they were never like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
They were either angry or they had all this trauma or they left the faith, the church or something like that. And it's like, no, they're clearly indicating to me for these reasons. I've had so many beautiful experiences where they have people on the other side have told me like, I've seen Jesus
Yeah.
and I know him personally
Hmm.
and he came for me
Yep.
and he wrapped me up. And that is why I know it's real. Like
Yep.
that is why I've changed. Because how can you, it's like pushing against a tidal wave. Like there's so much love in that. It's like,
Mm.
like the repentance is real and the change is real that we see in them on the other side. And I think we
Yeah.
have all the time in the world that we need for that.
Yeah, I've experienced that too. Those people saying I've met Jesus, and then they'll clarify even further, like personally, like we've had
Yeah.
one-on-one time together. It's
Yeah.
not just in a group setting. Like he's made time for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I have had a lot of incidences. I always talk about, for me, one of the fun things that spirits like to identify is like, who was that escort that brought them through the veil? Like,
Yes,
who
that's a
was
big
that person?
question.
Yeah, it's like a badge of honor for that person that gets to do it. They're like, it was me, I was yours. Will you be mine? Like it's like a fun thing. Um, and there have been a couple of times in really specific moments where people have told me like, mine was Christ. He came and pulled me out of this situation that was just awful and like redeemed my soul. And it's always extremely powerful. Like even just there's power in that name. There's
Mm.
so much power in that name. Even just bringing it up is always incredibly moving. And I think even the people that I'm sitting with can feel it in those moments. Like the spirit is present and they're like there's something here. They usually those particular sessions tend to get really emotional pretty quick.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you, how does like somebody who might be thinking, okay, I have some of these gifts, like they happen to me rather than like I can't really control when and where. When would be a good time for me to further my development? Because I meant to mention this last week and I forgot to. Elle has a new class coming up. It begins in like 2.5 weeks
2 weeks.
now. Yeah.
February 11th.
I highly recommend her class if you're thinking, I think there might be something for me here. When would you say is a good time for someone to who thinks maybe, I don't know, I'm not sure. What would be a good reason for them to continue to develop? I know you have a few spots left. It's not like you have a ton of spots left in your class, but there's still a couple left.
They
So
fill up pretty quick.
I know.
Um, yeah, I think it's a really personal thing, and it's not, like I said, without a lot of effort. Um, Anytime you're curious, I definitely recommend like testing the waters with that because for me, I'm a huge believer in the Lord wants us to learn all of the gifts, and they're available to us.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I read a quote the other day that really moved me, and it said, um, anything that is yours will never be withheld from God. And so it's like this is our divine right. This is our divine nature,
I call
right?
it positive entitlement.
Yeah, that's great.
That's my next book title, by the way. Nobody take it.
Look for it on shelves soon. Um, yeah, it's like these gifts are naturally meant to connect us to our Father in heaven and to our loved ones on the other side. And we are positively entitled them, right? We are meant to seek after them. So if you feel that drive, that curiosity of like, I wonder if I could see, test it out, go see, check the water, right? See how it feels for you, see how that fruit tastes. Is it good? If you have been thinking about it for quite some time and it seems to be a thematic thing that just keeps popping up in your life, um, maybe that's your indicator that it's time. Give it a prayer. Like, see how you feel about it. If it seems like all the roads have converged and it's magically fallen out of the air into your lap right now, I think oftentimes the spirit world is they're clever. they have a way of bringing things about and at the right moment at the right time. And if you can notice, but this is like, I was telling somebody the other day in one of my interviews for the class, I was like, over the past almost decade of doing this, I have created a checklist of things that help me know, like, okay, this is God speaking to me. This is like Him moving things in my life in order to push me forward. And if one of those things on that checklist is like, does it keep coming up all of a sudden, like out of nowhere? Is it something that like all of a sudden it's everywhere? It's like everywhere you turn, people are talking about it, or
That's
like
how it was
it
for
comes up
me.
multiple times. Yeah. And it's like, okay, I'm listening. Okay, I get it. Like,
Noted.
turn your ear to it and give it a chance.
Yeah.
Ask how. Have a prayer about it. Ask how the Lord would want you to do that and what it looks like for you. And I think on His timeline, that answer will definitely be made aware to you. Whether it's like all of a sudden, for me, years and years ago, when I asked that very question, I was like, all right, Lord, I got to turn it all over to you. Like, if you really want me to take it serious, like, path to this, then make it work. And we were poor law school students who didn't have any money in the world. My husband had an internship like locally, and he got like this much pay from that. We were living mostly off student loans. And it was like all within the course of 24 hours. I had met with somebody who I was kind of working with development, who was working with spiritual communication. And she was like, you should look into this person. They're really great. And I was like, cool, okay. I jumped onto their website. They had a course, and I felt the Spirit go, that one. And I was like, all right, I'll talk to my husband about it. And then he came home and he was like, did you pray about it? I was like, yep. And then like the very next day, they like, I don't know, it was like a bonus or something that we didn't know we were going to get. It was the exact amount necessary for that class. And I was like, it was not a small sum. And we didn't have any use for it because we were not expecting it. And it was like, God was like,
Here
here's
you
your
go.
sign. I was
Hmm.
like, all right. And he'll move things like that. Things will just, happen out of thin air. Miracles. Pay attention, and the way will open up.
Well, I mean, and luckily your class is not like a crazy amount of money. It's very
Yeah.
affordable.
Yeah. I work really hard to make it accessible. It's not about the money. It's about, I charge just for the minimum for my time because it does
Yeah.
take a lot of time. A
Yeah.
lot of time goes into that. But I'm really passionate about sharing that knowledge and helping people understand their gifts and how to use them um, in a positive way. And
Yeah.
that's important.
Well, I highly recommend it if you're considering it. If you're not sure about like, getting your feet wet, I offer a free YouTube link where you can kind of like learn how to connect to loved ones on the other side. And if you're like, this is definitely for me, then go take Elle's class after you do that. And I'll put the link to that free little YouTube. It's more focusing on connecting to your loved ones. It's just basically getting your feet wet. I send a lot of people that love that to Elle's class for further development. So we'll put links in the show notes so that you guys can access those resources.
And I don't know if I've mentioned this on the podcast yet, but um, for this year, I have this offering happening right now in the spring. February counts as spring, right?
Sure.
Spring to April, that is spring. And then we're having some really big life changes happening, so I won't be offering another one probably until the fall because my family has been notified we're moving to Korea. So huge across the world movement. I might not have time until the fall to do another one, but we'll see what the Lord says about that. I didn't think I'd have time to offer two before a baby either, but I'm not planning on it. But I definitely am always up for like personal conversations and mentorship. Also, if you happen to miss this class, reach out. You can find us on our website, which has links to both of our websites, and that is Through the Veil podcast at .com. Yeah.
Yeah, through the veilepodcast.com.
It's like Through the Veil podcast team is our email at gmail.com. We can also be found there. So hit up that website if you have any questions, if you're curious on where to take it further, and you can find both Camille and I there. Also, we have a Facebook presence. We have a Facebook community. If you haven't joined yet, think about it. It's Through the Veil podcast community.
Yeah. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you guys next time.
See you next time.